we're hearing that Sanders about 2 weeks ago came out and said, you know what? I think 6 trillion is actually
Mhm.
not the 4 or 5 trillion we were talking before. 6 trillion is actually the number. So what got spent? Like if this bipartisan bill goes through more or less as the contours that we've seen now, what's that other 6 trillion? And when I first heard Sanders come out with that, I thought like, okay, this is a way for Manchin to come on board on the reconciliation and walk away and go like, we got it down to $4.5 trillion. I really showed that Bernie Sanders. And I thought like, brilliant, right? Like Sanders is doing, and it feels like to some extent that the Democrats, I don't know if I trust it, that it's actually going to work out this way, but it feels like they're doing what, we were all saying is like, do what you got to do to get this money out the door. Like you go
Right.
do what you do to get this spending. How realistic is the 6 trillion now if Manchin and Cinema are heavily invested in the passage of reconciliation, regardless of what it is? They have the cover of the bipartisan bill, and they need that bipartisan bill, and it's just tied like wrapped around the reconciliation. How like is it possible we're going to get a $6 trillion reconciliation bill? And I mean, when I contemplate $6 trillion of spending that is overseen by Bernie Sanders, I'm like,
Right.
this is like party in the streets type of situation on some level. Cause we're talking about Medicare buy-ins or lowering the
Mhm.
age of Medicare. We're talking about adding millions of Americans to single payer health
Right.
insurance.
Right. Yeah. And when that was kicking around Congress, the immediate response from wasn't, this is crazy, this is too much. The immediate response from a bunch of places was, wait a minute, you didn't include our, $100 billion for dredging the Mississippi River, whatever. Like it was, hey, don't forget this. Like, and you could very quickly see it go to like 7 if that was the only pressure. The countervailing pressures coming from people like Kurt Schrader's longtime Blue Dog, who just said today, I'm not doing reconciliation, period. Forget it. So he's trying to set up this showdown where where he's just like, forget it, 6 trillion, I'm not doing it. And then it's like, okay, well then you only have a couple more votes that you can lose in the House. So then do you either negotiate with him, or do you just hold the line and say, look, we just need our 218? And Schrader, look, Biden has said he's not signing the bipartisan one unless we do both. And so that type of pressure from the right you could see trimming it. But progressives in the House have said that the Medicare expansion, dropping the age down to 55 is their highest priority. And then the question is, are they willing to draw a line in the sand over that?
How many Schraders are there?
That's what we're going to find out. There are far fewer than there used to be. He's a bit of a dinosaur, but there's Stephanie Murphy, there's Josh Gottheimer. Gottheimer's unlikely to vote against it, though. Very few of them can withstand the pressure of the president saying, I'm vetoing, I'm not going to do the bipartisan one, and then going back to their district and explaining, why they were the ones that stopped this like bipartisan bicameral operation. So there aren't a ton of them, but the child tax credit, to answer your question, makes up a huge chunk of that money because it expands it at least through 2025, and there are people pushing to make it permanent.
And in 2025, deep into 2025, we should remind people, would be theoretically either Joe Biden's second term or, I don't know, maybe Joe Biden doesn't run and
Nikki Haley's first term.
And good luck to Nikki Haley to roll that back, right? I mean, that is like, it's like another, and this isn't like the ACA where it's like starts off controversial. There's nobody out there going, the Republicans aren't running against the child tax credit right now.
Right.
And so, 2025, when I look at that, I'm like, okay, that's not doom and gloom if
Right.
you
And
get it into.
nothing's permanent in this world. Even if you made it permanent,
Right, of course.
they could always repeal it. So
When you say Gottheimer, I hear the salt caps going away. That's what I hear.
right.
Like, right? I mean, is that going to be the, and we should just tell people when the Trump administration passed the 2017 tax cuts, one of the things that they did to sort of offset it and really to punish in their mind blue states. I don't necessarily perceive it that way, but it was to punish the political class of the blue states was to say you can no longer deduct your, I think, past $10,000, the taxes that you pay locally and for state. California, New York, high tax states where wealthy people relied on those deductions, and presumably would have put pressure on those states to cut taxes, which has not happened.
Right. In fact, New York raised them. Right.
And then it was supposedly going to lead to some type of capital flight from those states, and they're gonna, and that also, according to the data, has not happened. And
Although it's
so
hard to tell because so many people moved because of the pandemic.
so many people moved because of the pandemic, but it, I, according to the data that I have seen,
Right.
they're not attributing it to
Right.
the salt deduction.
Right.
Now,
Because people like if they're rich, they live where they want to live,
exactly,
not where they're forced to live. That's
exactly.
what it means to be rich.
Only Rush Limbaugh spent 6 months a year in and a day in Florida.
That's why he
Uh,
claimed he was there. He loved it down there. Don't let him
yeah, I
lie.
bet you that's part of it too. It's like he just didn't.
He loved Daytona Beach or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but so it seems to me like that could be is something that we end up seeing. Maybe they'll pretend like there's some mitigation of
But
a
you're
complete
right.
rollback,
Yes.
right?
Right. Gottheimer could be like, look, you want my vote for this? Salt's got to go.
So how much do you think is going to happen in terms of like of this $6 trillion bill? And walk us through the process, because there's a two-phase process, and walk us through we're hearing different Democratic lawmakers say there are different thresholds as to
Mhm.
what they will take as evidence that the reconciliation bill will actually happen. I mean,
Right.
that Joe Manchin won't get up to the moment, go like, wait a second.
Right.
I didn't like the font and
Right.
I'm not doing this.
Right. So they have a recess coming up because of course they do. And then they're coming back, mid-July. And at that point they will, what I've been told is that they've been in talks with the parliamentarian for a long time. They've been running legislative language by her. They've been the two budget committees have been swapping language back and forth so that they'll be ready to go when they come back in July with the first piece of the reconciliation process, which is you go to the floor, you say, this is our top line number. And so that's when we'll find out whether they're going to do 4, 5, 6, whatever. They usually try to go high so that they can, they have wiggle room if they need to go down, because you can't go up once you've said it. And then you have a vote-a-rama, which is tough because you got a bunch of very old Democrats who then have to be in the Senate all night long, voting on endless amendments. So it then passes these reconciliation instructions onto committees. The committees then receive those instructions and they'll say, okay, we're allowed to spend $1.2 trillion. This is how we're spending it. And then they all kick it over to the budget committee, chaired by your man's Bernie Sanders. He reconciles them all back into another package and then kicks it back to the Senate floor, where there's another all night or sometimes 2 nights vote-a-rama, and then it passes over to the House. That can be a 2 or 3 week process, going from the floor to the committees to the budget committee back to the floor and then over to the House, which puts you into August, which is another recess. So whether they work through August or they hold it till after Labor Day still remains to be seen. They might, they're open to the idea of working in August, because when they come back, they'll be fleshing out their bipartisan package, and it can't sit there forever.
Right.
So they spend a couple weeks on that and pass it. You want to have them both ready because you've got people like AOC and the Progressive Caucus who are saying, I don't trust you guys to send me this. Like, we need it passed through the Senate. Like, we need it walked over here so we can lay our eyes on it before we vote on this first one. And then there are a lot of others who say, look, as long as it's through the half stage of the process, we trust that it's going to happen.
But so why trust that, right? Because Manchin, his favorite thing to do is at the 11th hour, no, I want the corporate tax rate ticked down by 3%, or I want
Right.
this concession that makes me look like I'm some sort of deal maker, and it really doesn't matter what it is substantively, except that it hurts the Democrats. So that's what I fear about this.
Although he'll do that anyway.
Yeah, but that's what I fear about this two-pronged approach, right? Is because the larger tranche, to borrow from Sam, it's very fluid, and there are a lot of ways that Democrats could muck it up.
For sure. Right. I wouldn't trust them if I were them. So the only reason to trust them would be if you're several weeks away. I can't think of a good reason to trust them, actually. Yeah. I think you got to stack the votes and move them, within a couple days of each other.
When AOC says, I'm not voting on the bipartisan bill until we're in the position of voting on the reconciliation, till the Senate has their hands off it, because we all know it's the Senate is really the big issue here. I mean, short of a couple of people in the House, and we'll see how that changes. But does she have other people?
Well, right now she has the Speaker of the House, which is quite something. Like, she threw down the marker that she's not putting it on the floor.
Pelosi said this.
Pelosi said this, but Ro Khanna had said it publicly before. The Progressive Caucus surveyed its 95 members, surveyed its members. I don't know the exact total, but they said that more than half of them said we'll hold firm. Now, they have said these kinds of things in the past and not, but this is a different scenario. Like, if you'll remember, they said they wouldn't vote for ACA without a public option. And then They voted for the ACA without the public option. But at that point, it was either take the ACA or get nothing. At this point, if they say no to the bipartisan deal, they still get the reconciliation package. So it gives them a lot more concrete in their spine.
Right. And theoretically, it's like if they reject the bipartisan deal and they only get the reconciliation is going to undoubtedly be as good, if not better, even if it's not $6 trillion, than the bipartisan thing. So this is not an all or nothing situation for them. It is a go big or go slightly as good,
maybe bigger.
Maybe bigger.
Right. It's not, and it doesn't have direct checks in it, and it doesn't have a bunch of vaccine distribution money in it, which was really jamming them in the COVID relief package.
Right.
So they had all of their constituents like, we're literally dying of this pandemic. We need this vaccine money, and it's got $1,400 checks in it that we need out the door. Everybody's calling them survival checks. So that made it a lot tougher for them to threaten to take it down.
Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.